not start the questions. I'll get in trouble.
What's your message for Super Tuesday voters?
Everyone, please move this way.
Super Tuesday, do you have a message for voters?
Thanks, come on.
Thank you so much. Thank you all.
Biden is on the run from his record and lying like crazy to try and escape accountability.
After all we've been through in our history, from independence to civil war to 2 world wars to a pandemic to insurrection, I refuse to believe that in 2024 we Americans choose to walk away from what's made us the greatest nation.
Look at the situation they got me facing. I can't live with no more. I'm as ways about to say, so I gotta be there with the hood deep. Too much television watching got me chasing dreams. I'm an educated fool with money on my mark. Got my chin in my hand and the cream in my eye.
Hey, welcome to this edition of The Soul Trap. If you haven't, make sure that you go to thesoultrap.com. Make sure you go to The Soul Trap on YouTube. Like and share, like and share, like and share. Help us get the word out as much as you can. And if you like The Soul Trap, I'm also going to give you a shameless plug for another great website for all of you that are in ministry, that are involved. It is thelittlebigchurch.com. 2 total different worlds, and yet somehow we make it work. The Soul Trap and thelittlebigchurch.com. Make sure to check those out. And we're glad to have you joining in. As always, we trust that whenever this broadcast finds you in good health, good spirits, and most importantly, and now more than ever, on that good and narrow way. Now, whenever you watch this episode, probably what will happen is, I believe tonight, Joe Biden is going to be giving his State of the Union address.
I'd be a winner, not really.
I could be wrong, but it would be interesting to find out if tonight at the State of the Union address, Joe Biden announces that he will not be running for re-election. It will be interesting to see if he does that. That would throw everything into chaos. Now, he might not. His double might get up and just hit the speech out of the park. Yes, I said that. His double might get up and hit the speech out of the park. But there is precedent before for presidents not accepting a second nomination. And so it'd be interesting to see, but time will tell. When you're watching this, you'll be able to check my prediction and see if it came true or not. But whether that comes true or not, we are going to be talking on this episode about what is getting ready to take place in 2024. The world has taken a turn for the surreal, and it has kicked into overdrive in 2020. You know that, I know that, and it is getting weirder and weirder by the moment. And I want to encourage you, if you haven't, to make sure to go over and check out our friends at Now the End Begins. If you're anywhere near Smyrna, you need to go to their bookstore. You need to get a hold of Grider and his crew over there and touch base with them. But Now the End Begins and their Prophecy News podcast, you've got to get a hold of that. Some of the best material, best news. And that's really what we're taking from here today, a lot of our information about what is going on. In this particular article that we're looking at here, it says yesterday's massive cell phone outage and Obama EMP Civil War movie Leave the World Behind have startling similarities. Now, if you were anywhere around for the news, you will remember that here just a couple days ago, and might be a little bit more now that you're watching this not in real time, but a couple days ago there was a massive outage. And then don't forget, not only was there a cell phone outage, but there was also a Facebook and Instagram outage. So there's a lot of things that are starting to move along. But what's interesting is the EMP outage, and then, or I should say the outage with the cell coverage, and then the Facebook and Instagram outage, and then wouldn't you know it, Obama has a movie that is coming out on Netflix about a civil war. Who would have figured? Well, on the Prophecy News at NTEB, Barack Obama is leading the way, the article states, in a spate of new movies, all warning of the coming United States Civil War in 2024. Now, all this, in a way, some people have argued, could be predictive programming. Now, if you're wondering what predictive programming is, I'm looking right here online at a pretty good definition of it. But predictive programming has a lot of different nuances to it. A lot of times we oversimplify the complicated. But in essence, what predictive programming is doing is laying the groundwork. It is programming in a predictive way people's response and what's going to take place. This article is talking about that. It says Barack Obama is leading the way in a spate of new movies, all warning of the coming United States Civil War in 2024. Now, I don't necessarily know that you would have a civil war similar to that of the War of Northern Aggression in the 1860s between the North and the South. But I do believe what you would have is a war from the government against pockets of resistance. This article states, our government has become ugly on both sides, and that's true. And civil war could erupt from the Trump camp just as easily as from the Biden camp in 2024. Now, that's hard for you and for me to imagine because a lot of us are pro-Trump guys all the way to the max. But you better be careful because the last wars have all been by conservatives. The last major governmental overtake have been by conservatives. And the last time this nation was shut down, it was under a conservative guy that was on our side. The article states a few days ago, the Barack and Michelle Obama production company, Higher Ground. You couldn't ask for anything better than that. Higher Ground released a new movie called Leave the World Behind. Now, I find that very interesting because there is a famous book series called Left Behind. So it's interesting sometimes the connectivity and serendipity that goes into it. Leave the World Behind. It's a dystopian end times thriller that features the United States government waging war against its own citizens. Now, this is coming from a former U.S. president and his wife and their production company. Now, it might not be as far-fetched as one thinks to imagine the armed forces could, in fact, turn on the citizen populace. We saw this happen during the pandemic. We heard over and over and over, as we saw video after video after video, of people that were arresting people for being in the park, for playing with their kids, for doing any number of outlawed activities simply for no other reason than they decided it was illegal. And whenever they were arresting people, you would always hear, I'm just doing my job. I'm just doing my job. We're just doing our job. Well, there is also the fact that not only is our government in a position to be able to do that, but there is an argument being made right now that the actual armed forces are being stacked by former and current nationals from other countries. Recently on Tucker Carlson, Doug McGregor was talking about, who is a highly intellectual man who understands what's going on in our government, he was talking about what is going on. And one of the things that's happening that a lot of people don't realize is that our country is being invaded from the border right now. Not only that, but it appears that our military is being stacked with foreign nationals. Watch this video clip and tell me what you think.
There is no higher honor than serving your country in uniform.
And that honor could be extended to migrants under a new bill introduced by Hudson Valley Congressman Pat Ryan. Called the Courage to Serve Act, this bill would offer qualified and vetted migrants an expedited path to citizenship if they serve in the military.
Well, you know, when I listen to the comments coming out of the Senate or the House, let alone the White House, I'm sometimes reminded of that famous statement in Vietnam. In order to save the village, we had to destroy it. Yes. I get the impression that's the plan in Washington. We have to destroy the country in order to save it.
Clearly.
At least, I guess, from the standpoint of everybody in Washington, whatever happened before they arrived was wrong, and the brave new world must be built in the future on the ruins of the past.
So when you see that video, it's very frightening to think about the pressure that is being put on our nation. Pressure from without, pressure from within, pressure from the top down, but there is also a pressure from the bottom up. The article at NETB states Barack Obama could have made a movie about anything he wanted to, yet he chose to bring a book to the screen that features civil war. There is, quote, a feeling in the air of the coming purge. Will it be in the hands of Democrat or at the hands of Republican? I could fairly easily make a pretty good case for either scenario, and I think he's exactly right. Truth be told, a low-level civil war has been percolating for quite a few years now, with America firmly divided into two opposing camps, as far apart as East is from West. What would it take to escalate to the point where the military is called in? Now, that is going to be very interesting, especially when it comes to the idea of the election. The article goes on to state, our government has become on both sides very, very negative. And civil war could erupt, especially when you have Donald Trump, quote-unquote, dictator for a day, involved, and not just Joe Obama's third term Biden. Stay awake and alert, the article says. Nothing is as it seems, and there are enemies on all sides. That's the memo, and that is exactly right. Could a second Donald Trump presidency slide into dictatorship? Now, this is where it gets real dicey. On our side, we're scared to death of Joe Biden, Kamala Harris, Obama, on and on and on. But I want you to remember that it was under Donald Trump, under the right-wing, conservative Republican president, that our country came to a grinding halt. I want you to remember that it was under George W. Bush that the Patriot Act eviscerated the Bill of Rights, and that we were launched into a war that is still going on today over weapons of quote-unquote mass destruction. I want you to remember that it was under George Bush, his father, that we got involved in an Iraq war that we should have never been involved in, when history clearly shows that Saddam Hussein was given the green light to go into Kuwait. Then we turned around and went at him again. In other words, what I'm trying to get you to understand is we tend to think if we can get our boy in office, we'll be okay. Maybe economically, maybe not. I would not be surprised if we saw some big things happen under Donald Trump. This article asks, could a second Donald Trump presidency slide into dictatorship? A sudden spate of dystopian warnings has got America talking about the possibility less than a year before the elections. Dark scenarios about what could happen if the twice impeached Republican former president wins 2024 have appeared in the space of just a few days and few weeks in major media outlets. This includes Washington Post, New York Times, The Atlantic, on and on and on. Now, folks, I want to brainstorm with you for just a moment, and I want you to think. As I said before, in 2020, the country was asked and brought to a stop. It was asked to throw away almost 300 years of constitutional law and brought to a stop. Now, one of the things we have to ask is, was there something bigger than right and left going on? Well, I think the answer is yes. And then especially when you get to the election and the insurrection, quote unquote, you have to wonder if that wasn't a government test run. Now let's see if the roles were reversed. What if Donald Trump wins? What if there is something like January 6th, only it's from the other side? Do you think that Donald Trump would hesitate to declare martial law? Do you think that there would be any limitation on what the Republicans and the right-wing side would do? It is possible that we could be prepped for something, only it be in reverse. We would all then rally around because we are so balkanized, we don't even care anymore about principles, truth, right, wrong, Constitution. We only care about winning. We only care about our guy. We only care about beating the other guy. And that's a dangerous, dangerous place to be in. This article goes on to state that grim predictions also came from top Republican Trump critics who said that the country is, quote, sleepwalking into dictatorship. Together, they paint a bleak picture of an angrier yet more disciplined Trump than during his first stint in the White House. One who could wreak vengeance on his perceived enemies and possibly try to stay in power beyond the two-term U.S. limits. You say, wait a second, I thought you're a Trump fan. I'm a constitutional fan. I'm for any leader who follows the Constitution and the Bill of Rights. I'm for wrong. I'm against wrong if it's on the left. I'm against wrong if it's on the right. And that is one of the things that has devastated us within the last 50 years is we are not able to get out of the left-right paradigm. We keep thinking that the Republicans are our friends. We keep thinking that the right is actually for us. We keep thinking that Fox News is actually on our side, and they aren't. It is a shell game. And what we're looking at is right and left, when what we should be looking at is elite and the common. That is where the divide is. It's not a right-left anymore. It's not a black-white. It is an elitist versus everybody else. Now, Donald Trump, the article states, responded to the warnings in typical style, laughing them off. He says, one of the people says, you're not going to be a dictator. And he said, no, other than just for a day. Trump said when asked in a televised Fox News town hall on Tuesday if he would abuse power or seek retribution. We're closing the border and we're drilling. After that, I'm not a dictator. Joe Biden, who is behind Trump in the polls, ahead of a likely replay of their bitter 2020 contest, said the warnings backed his own claims to be defending democracy. Quote, if Trump wasn't running, I'm not sure I'd be running. But we can't let him win. The 81-year-old diaper-wearing Democrat...
Come on, man.
I'm sorry, that was added by accident. The 81-year-old Democrat...
Take a test where you're taking cocaine or not? What do you think, huh?
...told campaign events in Massachusetts after stumbling through the teleprompter. Biden cited Trump's own increasingly violent language on the campaign trail, saying his rival's description of his opponent as vermin echoed the language used in Nazi Germany. The most eye-opening piece appeared in the Washington Post by conservative commentator Robert Kagan with the headline, quote, a Trump dictatorship is increasingly inevitable. We should stop pretending. Comparing him to the power-grabbing Roman Emperor Julius Caesar. The lengthy article says neither the U.S. Constitution nor the Supreme Court could prevent Trump being president for life if he wanted. That's a pretty aggressive statement. Kagan wrote that if Trump survives the trials he faces over trying to upend the 2020 election and cling to power and wins the next election, he will in effect feel he is above the law and can get away with anything. The New York Times analyzed the ways that a, quote, second term could unleash a darker President Trump. Trump has, quote, spoken admiringly of autocrats for decades and would likely follow their example by packing the civil service with loyalists and using the Justice Department to crack down on opponents. Now, what's fascinating to me is that, that's not happening already. Like the Joe Biden crowd, the left isn't using it. You see, when you read these articles, one of the things you find is that there is a constant left-right paradigm. It's not left-right. It's top-down. Now, the Atlantic News magazine, they dedicated an entire January-February 2024 issue to what a Trump presidency would look like with an editor's note titled simply, A Warning. Well, listen, they're all scared to death. They're all worried. But they're not worried for left or right. It doesn't really matter. They don't really care if a Republican wins. They don't really care if a Democrat wins. What they want is an elite win. And the thing that scares them, I think, about Trump is that whatever Trump may or may not be, for some reason, he identifies with the common man. And for some reason, the common man identifies with him. And he is able to rally that support and power. That's what they don't like. He doesn't fall into the paradigm of the elite and the commoners. And that's why it's going to be very, very interesting to see how they try to keep him out of the election by hook or by crook. And the truth of the matter is, it's going to be very interesting, especially if things get dicey, and especially if the United States government and military forces involved. Now, because most of us have gone to public school, government education school, we have zero understanding of the military. We don't really understand when we look back at our military history to see how often the military has been called up. It goes all the way back to the colonial days when the Whiskey Rebellion was put down. It goes all the way back to, you can read about Samuel Butler. You ought to read about him if you haven't. The tent cities that Douglas MacArthur was involved in putting down. So the United States government has been called out on many occasions. You can look at the Kent protests where students were killed. You can look at a lot of different areas. And it's going to be interesting because if things get dicey, what happens if the government does feel the need to call up the military to protect civil order? Well, another layer of question that comes to that is, who is actually in our military? there is an even more interesting article that comes up that asks this question. Is China sneaking military personnel into the U.S. via the border? U.S. News reporter Alex Phillips writes the following. The Republican chair of the House Homeland Security Committee has said that it was very likely that military personnel were being inserted into the United States by China by crossing the southern land border. Now listen to that again. The Republican chair of the House Homeland Security Committee said that it is, quote, very likely that, quote, military personnel were being inserted into the United States by China by crossing the southern land border. Announcing an investigation into the Secretary of Homeland Security over his role in the border crisis, Mark Green, a former U.S. Army serviceman and representative for Tennessee, claimed many of the Chinese nationals entering America were, quote, military-age men, many of them having, quote, known ties to the ruling Chinese Communist Party and People's Liberation Army. Ladies and gentlemen, the invasion of America has already begun. It's already happening. It's not going to, it is happening. And the Trojan horse has been rolled into the United States. The question is how big and how bad it truly is. The article goes on to state, this comes after Melissa Dalton, Assistant Secretary of Defense for Homeland Defense, told the House Armed Services Committee in March that China, along with Russia, was now posing more dangerous challenges to the safety and security of the U.S. homeland. Both Dalton and Green cited the incident in February in which a Chinese spy balloon, which Beijing claimed was a wayward weather balloon, passed over the continental U.S. before being shot down and recovered off the coast of South Carolina as a sign of this new threat. Chairman of the House Homeland Security, Representative Mark Green, speaks during a news conference about the security, and he stated during a press conference, quote, a massive surge in Chinese nationals have crossed the southern border, claiming many of whom are military age. They have known ties to CCP and to PLA. Now, public data from U.S. Customs and Border Protection Agency show in 2023 there has been a massive spike in the encounters of Chinese nationals at the southern land border. So what that tells you is that if there's a spike that big, whatever they're catching, how many more are actually getting through? There has been a massive spike in the encounters of Chinese nationals at the southern land border. When border crossings were overall lower due to coronavirus pandemic restrictions, but now the numbers are astronomically high. As of April, there had been a total of 9,000 encounters in the fiscal year to date, which runs from October to September, rising from 2022 where there were only 2,000. Now, let me give that to you again. Almost 10,000 military-age Chinese men encounters. So if that's the encounter, is it wrong to say that there's more than that getting through that we don't know of? While 1,500 of these individuals were in a family unit, the vast majority were single adults. It really doesn't make a difference, so. The breakdown of the age and what proportion of the male is not exactly clear, so there is room for this number to fluctuate. But the reality of the matter is, Beijing is coming across our southern border. Asked about the credibility of Green's claim, Rebecca Grant, a PhD and a national security analyst at the Independent Research, told Newsweek that she personally believed it to be true, referencing the likelihood of some immigrants having ties to the Chinese state, given the many Chinese nationals already in the U.S. 5.4 million in 2021, according to migration policies. Here's what she said. If you're a bad guy that wants to infiltrate operatives into the USA, the southern border is a pretty easy way to do it. A Department of Homeland Security official told Newsweek that it used biometric and biographical information on those encountered at the border to identify potential terrorists or criminals and prevent their release in the United States. They stressed that, quote, anyone who poses a national security or public safety threat is detained and not released into the United States. Sure, right. When questioned on his source for this claim, Green said that he had heard it from a border sector chief, but declined to say more. However, he added, "We have a classified briefing on it in the very near future." Newsweek approached the CBP for comment regarding Green's claims. Grant said that it was an area of national security, where the intelligence community was, quote, "never going to give us public information. But the fact that they're going to brief Congress on it tells me that there's something going on there." Now, what is very interesting about this is sometimes you can look and see from other illustrations what's going on. Take, for instance, the Russia and the Ukraine war. Grant also drew a distinction between the possible intentions of Russia's infiltration of Ukraine and the supposed infiltration of the U.S. Stated, "We know Russia infiltrated political operatives into the special forces, maybe even up to and around Kiev, and who knows what else. Russia did some very organized infiltration." Did you get that? Long before they went in with their tanks, they went in with think tanks. That's what they're saying. The China case, Grant stated, is a little different, where you're looking not to infiltrate as a spearhead of military force, but to augment their long-running espionage against the United States. The national security expert added, "It's not the beginning of a military operation necessarily. It's more probably an enhancement of their already substantial espionage operations here." Now, folks, we're here. I mean, we've been talking about this for a long time. But we're here, and they are flooding across the border. Grant goes on to state in this article, deep insertions are a Russian spy tradecraft from way back. The closer alliance between it and China that the invasion of Ukraine has spawned made it entirely possible that Beijing is simply copycatting Russian tactics. Now, if you really want to see how dangerous this is, go to Infowars.com and check out, we'll put it in the link below, check out this article by Michael Yon, Massive U.S.-Chinese Invasion Camps. Camps that are already here in the United States of America. So what I'm trying to tell you is that 2024 is going to get very interesting. And be very, very careful about hanging your hopes on Donald Trump. It could be that Donald Trump leads us out of the wilderness. It could be that Donald Trump leads us back to Egypt. Either which way, it really doesn't matter what the figurehead is, because all Trump and Biden are different figureheads for the old paradigm that keeps us jumping and hopping back and forth and back and forth. What it does is have us looking left to right and right to left rather than up and down. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is what is happening. The elites are eroding our borders and allowing these foreign nationals to come flooding in because they are getting ready soon and very soon to implement a reshaping of the very fabric and constitution of the United States of America. What we're facing is a battle not from without, but exactly like the Romans, a battle that first begins from within. As the Chinese pour in, and they take more and more and more deeper positions, we truly may find ourselves kung fu fighting.
Everybody was kung fu